breaking down everyday workplace issues and diagnosing the hidden sickness, not just the obvious symptom. Our hosts, James and Kobe.
Did we lose a patient?
No, that's just my lunch.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Kobe, he's James. Let's get started with the question. Work from home, the problem or the solution?
So work from home is kind of a loaded term. It's actually been used to talk about a couple different things already. We talk about work from home, we talk about remote work, we talk about hybrid work, and we kind of use them interchangeably when they are different concepts. So just for clarity's sake, I want to talk about what those three things are first before we kind of jump into what whether or not it's a problem or a solution. So when we're talking with folks, when we're talking about remote working, we're generally talking about working, like if I'm working I'm based in Nova Scotia. If I'm working for a company in the UK, then I am a remote worker. I don't have the opportunity to regularly go into the office. It's just the nature of the job requires that I am not in the office I work remotely. Versus a work from home is typically a benefit that is given to people, the ability to work from home. So typically you are in a geographical region where you could go into the office, but you're given the opportunity to either work full-time from home or on a part-time basis from home. And that's where we get into the hybrid piece of, so for myself personally, for the last, several months anyways, I've been working a hybrid. I work from home 2 to 3 days a week, and I'm in the office 2 to 3 days a week. There are just certain things that I can do in the office that are far easier for me to accomplish there. And there are certain things that I can do here at home, like our podcasting, where I have a nice, cozy office environment that it makes it easier to perform certain tasks here. So when we're talking about those topics, and today we're really going to be focusing on the benefit that you bestow on employees of working from home or providing work from home or providing a hybrid solution. And we're not really talking about the remote work where you don't have the option of going into the office.
Right. And I think that it's also kind of good to kind of clarify a little bit, just kind of adding to that with if you're in like a city or in a geographical region and you don't have a remote, and your employer is in the same region or area, and you're working from home all the time, you don't have a remote job, you have a work from home job. And I mean, so it's kind of, it really is that the option isn't really there, which is what is, because remote work is not a new idea. That's been around for a long time, and there's a lot of benefits to it about removing geographical barriers for employers to find talent, and also for talent to find employers. So it is something that's been around for a while. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about, especially as we kind of get into kind of the pieces about kind of the workplace culture, those kinds of things like that will probably be relevant to remote work. But as you said, we're really talking about jobs that operationally allow for work from home. We're not talking about production jobs or customer service jobs. You can't do any kind of hybrid work from home. It's about mostly jobs where technology allows you to have the option of working from home and being able to do, as much, at least half of the job as well from home as you could from the location of that your workplace is.
Yeah, and you're right. This is really not a new concept. It's been around, these remote workforce has been an opportunity for a long time. But the technology has gotten to the point, and we were all forced into various stages of, remote or work from home situations, hybrid situations during COVID, that, it's really come to the forefront. And it's and I think one of the reasons why it's such a hot button topic right now is because so many people got exposed to the benefits of working from home. right? And there are many, many benefits that come with the ability to work from home. You know, being if you have children who require childcare, being home for emergency situations, still being able to be productive and do your work, but being able to mitigate some of those childcare challenges can, in and of itself, is a non-monetary massive benefit for many parents. Childcare, I know childcare in Canada, in Atlantic Canada, in Nova Scotia, is expensive, and it's not easy to access for a lot of people. So removing that barrier is a huge benefit for many people. There's also the convenience. There's, saving on your fuel costs, which are ridiculous now anyways. But you also, like, I've got a 35-minute commute into the office. Not terrible. I enjoy it. We're not in a major city. So, I mean, my 35-minute commute is on the highway listening to a podcast, and it's kind of relaxing in the morning. But if I spent 35 minutes to an hour in a traffic jam every morning, and then again to get home at the end of the day, I'd be pissed off all the time because I do not like traffic. I'm not the most patient person in the world. So there's all kinds of these benefits that people were exposed to, many for the first time, and they are reluctant to give up these benefits.
Absolutely. And it's funny because, like, yeah, so when you listed things like, the childcare, the commute, and all the kind of stuff really are some of the things that people were like, wow, these were things I didn't realize I could have a better experience with, or didn't, or this kind of realization that kind of came with the lockdowns or those kinds of things too. So part of it was, and out of necessity, operational necessity, a lot of businesses, and encouraged the work from home experience during that time. And part of it was like, some businesses had employees asking about those kind of accommodations pre-COVID, and they were like, no, we can't do that. And then when COVID hit and it became an operational imperative, all of a sudden we're like, yeah, we can totally do that. And then everyone's like, what? And now and then some of them are going back to say, no, we really can't do that. And they were like, no, you lied.
We just did it for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We did it for 2 years. The productivity maintained the same levels or was higher.
Yeah.
Like, don't pull that crap of, oh, suddenly the world has changed again, and operationally we can't do it anymore. That's garbage.
Yeah. So when it comes to a lot of the justifications, because that businesses make or managers make about why people need to come back to the office, what we kind of categorize them in kind of 3 different categories. There are legitimate reasons why people should be working from the office more, if not full time, and there's a ton of not legitimate reasons. And I'm sure many people that are listening can have heard a lot of those. But there's also ones that, or what we call false equivalencies, where they sound like they should be right, but they're really not. So as far as legitimate reasons, there's actually not that many of them. And we're not going to be able to list them all, but like some of the big ones that might be easier for people to relate to are things like collaboration. So like when we are together in the office, like our team, we use our office time together as what we call our scheming time, where we kind of do our brainstorming, our planning, our working together on stuff. It's easier to share things when we're like, in the offices next door or just down the hall. And that kind of stuff is a lot it's a lot easier of an experience to have that kind of collaboration. Collaboration is still doable virtually, but it's just seems to be more energy.
Well, for us, it's really like we have collaboration tools that we use in the office. We have a space that is dedicated that we use specifically for collaboration.
Yeah, big whiteboards and TVs and stuff like that. That makes it
right.
all.
So we've intentionally designed a space to be able to perform this task, because collaboration is an essential. Everything that we do within Roman 3 is based from a collaborative model. And it is central to everything that we do. And it is one of the core activities that we engage in. And as such, the best place for us to collaborate is in the office, because we have specifically designed the supports and services and tools and technology around that. That, and it gives us an opportunity to also, continue to build rapport with people in another setting.
Right. And a lot of what you're kind of saying of having the space and the place is kind of the another reason, a legitimate reason why there's working at the office has benefits, and that's access to equipment. So like, we have our collaboration tools and equipment. I almost work full time from the office because I've got a nice setup, multiple screens and tools and resources are all kind of right at my fingertips. And lugging all that stuff home with my crazy busy family makes it really challenging to kind of have that space. So a lot of the equipment I wouldn't move back to my home office. I would keep kind of here at our office building, and that equipment access is another legitimate reason, because some things, you can't have, if you got one big expensive piece of equipment, like, printers or whatever your company uses, having that in the one location for everyone to access makes sense. You can't buy that for everybody. So those are another legitimate reason for people coming back to the office.
Yeah. As you said, there's also a whole host of illegitimate reasons or garbage reasons that are kind of used as excuses. And I think that's the biggest thing, is that I see them as excuses to pull people back to the office.
Right.
And some of them just drive me nuts. More and more recently, there's been this kind of idea that the only way to really, create a tight, a close-knit team is that you have to be in person to do that. The only way to, I used the word rapport earlier, like, when we are collaborating, being in person gives us another opportunity to build that rapport amongst our team. But there's this idea that started to kind of permeate a lot of business thought, a lot of business articles, that saying that the only way to build rapport or build a healthy culture is to force people back to the office. And that is just not true. It requires...
we touched on that our last podcast, talking about comments from Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to get on my soapbox again, because I'll go off on a tangent, and
this will be like a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah. I'll keep the ranting to a manageable level.
Okay.
But like, that is one excuse that is presented that to me is a false equivalent. It's people are saying it's to do one thing, but it does not accomplish that. Or it's illegitimate reason, whatever.
So I mean, I would put that under the not legitimate reasons, because so part of it, and we talk about this in a lot of our training, because we use a lot of psychology and how we build our courses, how we build our content and everything like that. And one of the things that comes up a lot when you talk about, it's always been done that rapport is built from people being beside each other in proximity, or it's always been done that the manager walks by the desk to see, make sure everyone's working. And that's what we call, or what we call it, but it's called the implicit bias to convention.
Yeah.
When you are thinking the old way is the only way, or the right way, or I only want to do things the way that it has been done, you're assuming the old way is better, or how it used to be was better. What you're comfortable with is better.
And I think that last bit is the really important part. It's often default to your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Right. This is what I know already. I know how to manage a team in person. I know how to check my team's progress in person. Mm-hmm. So because I already know how to do this, this is what we're going to do.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and that idea, that implicit bias to convention, is something that probably is the heart of a lot of reasons. It's not a reason into itself, but it's where a lot of the, well, yeah, I'm used to it. I'm comfortable with it. I like it when people are here. Like we've talked to, like, different people, like, at big law firms, and they're like, yeah, the managing partner wants everyone to come back to the office just because that's what they're used to, and those kinds of things. And that implicit bias to convention kind of is how a lot of business decisions get made. And it's not necessarily the best way to do it, but that's where a lot of, I think, the heart of most of these not legitimate excuses, as you said, kind of come from. Just like another one is justifying the office space cost. Well, we pay for these buildings, we pay for this kind of stuff, we want people to fill them. And like, well, yeah, but there's also throwing good money after bad. If you realize that if you've been taught that there's a better way to do things that doesn't require those spaces, isn't that new learning probably worth exploring, instead of just, again, implicit by the convention. We've always had office spaces, and actually trying to do things a way that may not require those office space costs.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think there's another reason that is not ever actually spoken about this way, but I think a lot of people are being forced back to the office just because their manager wants to look over their shoulder.
Yeah.
The manager feels like they need to, they can't trust their team to work remotely. They can't trust that the work is going to be done, or we talk a lot about confident leadership, and the death of leadership. One of the 3 deaths of leadership is micromanagement. And I've seen this one a lot. Unfortunately, I have a lot of personal experience with this one, and it's kind of my pet peeve. But oftentimes micromanagement stems from a lack of confidence, stems from a lack of confidence in the manager's ability to lead and motivate and ensure that work is being done. And I see this as one of the reasons why many people are being forced back into the office without good cause, just because somebody wants to be able to monitor and watch closely what people are doing. The example that you talked about, talking with our colleague in the legal industry, of the managing partner wanting people to come back so that they can physically be in the office and monitor what people are doing, right? Highly intelligent, capable professional, not the strongest management and leadership style.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of when, as you mentioned, the false equivalency before, but I think this is actually probably where it really does live. Is it's easier for managers to stay on top of things and have oversight when everyone is in person. And I think that is a false equivalency, because having people around does not necessarily, it might make it more comfortable and more, and simpler. It requires less effort and requires less learning curve, but it doesn't mean that it's actually a better way to manage and to do oversight. I think that's where the false equivalency kind of comes in.
You're right. And we talk about this a fair amount we've talked about it in different podcasts. We talk about it in different YouTube videos and articles and our training, the whole idea of the difference between being busy and being productive.
Right.
And if you want to guarantee that your staff are merely being busy, haul them back into the office for no good reason. You will see that people are busy at their computers. They will be engaged in something, and they will look like they are working, and tasks will be completed. But if you actually want people to be productive, if you want people to get the most tasks accomplished within the time frame that they are given, you have to speak to what they need. And if you have not sold them on a legitimate need to be back in the office, then all you're doing is creating discontent.
Right.
Potentially creating disengagement, which is a very expensive problem in our workplaces.
Yeah. And so what's funny, I always like to give our definition of busy and productive, just because it a lot of people have said it's really helpful. So I thought I'll just give that real quick. So
Sure.
being busy is using as much time as you can with the tasks that you have, and being productive is doing as many tasks as you can with the time that you have. And that differentiation is something that is a helpful way for people to kind of wrap their mind around what that is. If you're trying to get as much done as you can within time, then you're productive. And a lot of people find that they can be more productive at home, because they can maybe work when they have a more productive mindset. Like, people sometimes are slow moving in the morning, and so maybe if they could do more work later on in the day, that might make their productivity higher, or they could jump from one thing to the other, or they can come back refreshed. And I mean, so, but if the goal is to complete tasks, and that's kind of the benefit, the productive benefit. We're busy, as you're right. People can just be, like, sitting there with on social media with, and then someone walks by, a window switch, and they're on their spreadsheets or whatever like that. Like, that those types of things, legitimately happen. It doesn't
Mhm.
improve productivity. People just get better at hiding the being busy.
Well, and I've got a, of course, I've got a story. Um, I've got a perfect example of that. Several years ago, I started a new job, very excited about this opportunity. It was a job that I had been angling for a while, and with a team that I was excited to join, doing work that was really important to me. So I entered into the job with a high level of enthusiasm, ready to go. What was funny is that I remember for the first at least 2 weeks of the job, like, the job was 8:30 to 4:30. I remember about 4:30 rolling around the first couple days, and nobody was packing up. The CEO hadn't left yet, so nobody else was leaving. 5 o'clock rolls around, CEO is still in their office, so everybody else is still in their office. 5:30 rolls around, and the CEO gets up from their desk. So everybody starts packing up. No, they were just going to the washroom. So, like, but I mean, this idea that I wasn't actually doing any more work from 4:30 to I think it was about 5:45 when I actually got out of there. But I stayed at my desk because I wanted to look busy, because the environment that the CEO had created was that if I'm there, you're there. And if
Right.
I'm busy, you're busy.
Right.
And they had a very weak understanding of the difference between people being busy and people being productive.
Mhm.
And to them, if you were at your desk working, if they could see you at your desk doing something, then that was what they wanted.
Right. That
And
was
they reinforced through their behavior that the only thing that really mattered was if you were busy or not.
Yeah. And I think if we go back to the question I asked at the very beginning, work from home, the problem or the solution, I kind of think it kind of comes back to this busy versus productive. Because if you're trying to create busy people, then work from home can be a problem. But if you're trying to create productive people, then work from home can be the solution. Because a lot of people are like, so we talked about kind of the businesses reasons for people coming back to the office, but let's talk a little bit about the people, the employees reasons for not coming back to the office. So the people who are trying, so people are trying to stay away from the office for some benefit. Some of it is around productivity. Like, again, like I was kind of alluded to, they can maybe work when they're a little bit more productive during the day. They can take better breaks. They can kind of come at things when they're, in the mood, or when they're not distracted.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually, and as you said, I don't have any stats to, I've read stats, but can't recalling it right now. But there are a number that said, like in the UK, there were stats that said productivity, went up like 15-20% during work from home, during lockdown. So there really was this benefit where people that were engaged in their jobs, those who were engaged, could actually complete more when given that flexibility to work from home. And then you alluded to the whole thing around like childcare and commuting and kind of having that almost like that better work-life balance is another reason why people are seeing this the hybrid and work from home options as being a real asset. Um, but then if we talk about some of the other reasons, people want to avoid the office because of the stresses that kind of come with the office. Like I'm sure your exact story you just gave, that was probably a very stressful workplace, and you probably would look every opportunity you could to not be around, especially at the end of the
Well, yeah, I mean, I was fortunate in that job because my job required that I was out of the office a lot. I was traveling around our region, meeting with businesses, providing support to businesses, and it required me to be out of the office more than I was in the office. The days that I had to be in the office to do paperwork, I just dreaded. So I ensured that I had the highest possible client caseload so that I was working outside of the office with clients as much as humanly possible.
Right. Yeah. And so there are these things where the employees are, again, like they get exposed to and used to the benefits of work from home at hybrid workplaces. And a lot of it has to kind of do with the culture of the workplace. If the culture, and it's not just busy versus productive, but if the culture does reinforce productive, usually it's about reinforcing positive experiences and job satisfaction and engagement and psychological safety and all the things we talked about, like belonging in our previous podcast up until now. So usually those kind of go together when you're trying to create a more a workplace that values productivity. Whereas if your businesses are trying to establish a culture of busy, then usually those things don't exist. Usually it's, there's not psychological safety. Usually there's this expectation of, of just following the lead and whatever is said about leadership. If they want to micromanage, then that's how things get done. And again, that implicit bias to convention and those kinds of things too. So it's one of those things where, again, going back to the problem or the solution, it kind of really comes down to a better question is kind of what is the workplace you're trying to craft? What is the
Right.
culture you're trying to craft? And again, is it for the managers? Is it just to justify the norms of your workplace? Is work from home or the desire to have people come back to the office, is that about you just justifying what's normal to you? Or do you actually want to improve output?
Yeah, and I want to be clear. We're not saying that work from home is always the right solution, right? Work from home is a tool. Hybrid workplaces are a tool for you to use. Like any other tool, it will be the best solution in some situations, and it will be the worst solution in some situations. If you only have one tool at your disposal, then if you only have a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Every problem's a nail. This is an opportunity for businesses to examine what are they actually trying to accomplish, and are they trying to give their employees a benefit? And so, the increased flexibility, greater autonomy, greater trust, freedom over their work, the ability to work how and when they want, these benefits work really, really well for hybrid and work from home situations. If you focus on the results of somebody's work.
Right.
If you focus on the tasks that somebody is performing, and that tasks have to be performed in a certain way at a certain time, then work from home is not going to be the solution for you. It's not to say that you couldn't reorganize the way that you provide these benefits, or reorganize the priorities that you place around work. But it really comes down to, from an organizational perspective or from your perspective as a manager, what are you trying to accomplish here? Because if it's not about providing a benefit to your employees, then it may be about ensuring oversight.
Right. Because kind of, and kind of the question is, why is it that a manager or the head of an organization or whomever's opinion that people need to come back to the office, why is that your opinion? Is it because of legitimate reasons, like we mentioned, collaboration, access to equipment, those types of practical operational things? Or does it kind of fall back to that implicit bias to convention, where we've always done it, so that's how we should always do it?
Right.
Or is it more about control and desire to almost micromanage? I feel like that's a question that you kind of personally have to ask yourself. Why is it that I think people need to come back to the office? Or why is it that we can't provide this luxury, or at least, or not luxury, but this tool? Or even, why are we not exploring getting the most out of this tool? Because work from home, as you said, is a tool. So why are we not trying to capitalize on another tool that we have access to? If it's beyond just the legitimate reasons, if there are things that are holding us back, is it us holding us back?
And there are so many pieces of technology, so many tools, so many resources out there that can support your work from home efforts, or the efforts that you create to provide the opportunity to work from home. It requires some effort, though. It requires you to look at the problem a little differently. It also requires you to manage your team differently.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a big one that we haven't really talked about yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes with what you've been talking about with the bias towards convention. Because for many, the first problem is that something in the range of 59% of managers have never received any form of management training to begin with.
Right.
So we've done a very, very poor job as businesses in providing management skills, management training to the people who are leading others. So if people have learned by default one particular way and they've never been given an opportunity or taught how to do things differently, they are going to focus on what they know. That's human nature. And what they know is managing people who are all contained in the same space. Management is a skill that can be learned. Managing in-person teams is a skill. Managing remote teams or work from home teams is a skill. If, as a manager, these are not easy questions to answer, but if you get to the point where you're doing the self-reflection and you realize that, it is actually because I don't really know how to get the most out of my team, or I don't really know how can I trust that my team is doing what they are supposed to or what they say they're going to do. These are management skills that can be taught, that you can learn. I would recommend, obviously, first place to go is to check out our knowledge suite and to check out our YouTube page, because we talk about management skills and how you can build management skills. And we talk about remote work, hybrid work, work from home as a management skill specifically. So check us out on YouTube, Solutions Explained by Roman 3, or on our knowledge suite. And we'll provide links to that in the descriptions and all the doodads for the podcast.
We should have had, before you started saying that, shameless plug alert. But you're 100% right. And actually, and I think even because like one of the reasons why we thought this was an important topic to talk about was we've seen tons of articles on and requests for experts on how to get people back to the office. And that's the big question.
Yeah.
How do we get employees back to the office? And I think you actually really brought the better question forward. We should stop asking the question, how do we bring people back to the office? And we should start asking the question, how can we become as successful at leading hybrid or work from home teams as we are leading fully in-person teams?
Right.
And that really should be the question that we should be seeing articles focusing on, and not how do we go back to status quo? How do we become better with the tools that we have now?
Yeah.
And I really think that is the one of the big takeaways that people should really have from this is that the questions about how to get people back, or the best ways to bring people back to the office, top 10 tips to bring your workforce back, really should be, how do we get managers better at leading hybrid and work from home teams?
Absolutely. And what I find so funny about that question of how do I get my employees to come back to the office? Just by asking, if you are asking yourself that question, then you need to do some serious reflection. Why are people refusing to go back to the office? What is it about your environment that drives people away? Why do people prefer to work from home rather than go into the office? If it could be a big red flag that you have some substantial workplace culture issues present in your office, and people are avoiding the stress, the harassment, the bullying, the lack of psychological safety, the micromanagement, there's so many reasons why people would, if you're asking yourself, if you're struggling to get your employees to return to the office, it's time to do some reflective introspection.
Absolutely. All right, I think I want to kind of wrap this up with kind of a summary. So we talked about there is the working from home and hybrid work is a tool, and that it's something that we have been exposed to since the COVID lockdowns, and something that we really should be trying to get the most out of. There are legitimate, not legitimate, and false equivalency reasons that people are trying to force employees back to the office. But the real question should be about whether or not they're trying to create busy employees that are easier to monitor and micromanage in the workplace, or if they're trying to create productive employees who are empowered to bring their best work where or whenever they can do that, if in a more of a results-based work. We need to stop asking the question, how do we get people to come back to the office? And we should start asking the question, how can we become successful at leading hybrid or work from home teams as we are leading fully in-person teams? And I think that if we can look at this whole issue with a new perspective and kind of reflect on why we have this implicit bias to convention, if we're trying to get people back to the way things always were, I think we might be able to actually get the most out of this new tool, this normalized tool of work from home and hybrid work,
right,
and actually create better workplaces and more productive companies.
Excellent.
All right. So that about does it for us. For a full archive of our podcast and access to the video versions hosted on our YouTube channel, visit roman3.ca/podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
For more information on topics like these, don't forget to visit us at roman3.ca. Side effects of this podcast may include improved retention, high productivity, increased market share, employees breaking out in spontaneous dance, dry mouth, aversion to the sound of James's voice, desire to find a better podcast.